Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Familiar with the Matter, the show where I talk to people who know stuff about things. And today joining me together for the first time, once again, at least not individually, in human form, and Matt Orchard. Good evening, morning, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Everyone, just for everyone's edification, if you need to have information about either Matt or For Me, you can find their links in the description below, Patreons, YouTube channels, Twitter, the whole nine yards. But in case there's anybody here who does not know who you are and what you do, Matt Orchard, who are you and what do you do?
I run a YouTube channel called Matt Orchard Crime and Society, which I started just a bit under 2 years ago now, I guess, which is basically, expositories on stories mainly about crime, some interrogation breakdown stuff, sort of in the vein of Jim Can't Swim, but also some sort of broader stuff as well. I have a few stories on there that aren't actually necessarily strictly crime, but that is there's normally a crime component to them. I guess that's the most succinct way I could kind of sum it up.
Okay. And For Me, who are you and what do you do?
Well, I go by Inhuman form on YouTube, so let's just keep it at that. But my channel started off much like Matt's, where I started talking about crime. But even when I was doing that, I was more kind of interested in the political or psychological aspects of things. Not that Matt isn't, but I eventually started kind of leading that way. And now my videos are more kind of focused on phenomenology of socio-political or social psychology issues. So kind of dealing with like nuclear war, generational differences, whatever's going on realistically.
Yeah, so you guys kind of hit on part of the inspiration for me wanting to have you both on at the same time. Now, I'd interviewed both of you individually a while back, but not as long back as my mind thinks, because, Matt, I talked to you in September of 2020. It feels like it was a million years ago. And same thing with you, For Me. It was just last March that I spoke to you. Yeah, but everything that's happened so far in the last year or so, and the 2 years in between, of course, it just feels like it's been a lot longer since I've been able to talk to you individually. But yeah, so you both kind of hit on part of the inspiration for why I wanted to have you on, and that is you both started your YouTube channels in effectively the same genre, the Jim Can't Swim imitation. And since that time, and since I interviewed you, of course, things have changed and evolved for both of you in completely different directions, even though you have similar, in the broad strokes, focuses. So what I wanted to do, and I've been working on this a lot to try to figure out how to best introduce this discussion or start this discussion going. I have a question, a big philosophical question to ask you, but I think it is necessary that I predicate it with an example as a lead-in. So when the pandemic hit and all the lockdowns started and I had to start working from home, the simple geographic change of not having a workplace versus a home place started changing my content, because I would spend 6 or 7 hours working at my computer here at home and doing spreadsheets and detail work and everything else. And once I was done, the notion of then switching over to scripting and editing and recording voice and editing audio and everything else felt like an extension of my workday and no longer a separation of work and hobby, because I've tried to keep this.
That's right, because you're in the same space.
Generally speaking, a glorified hobby. And so as a consequence of that, I started doing almost exclusively live stream stuff, save for a couple of experiments with some Jonestown recordings and 3 strangely oddly successful crime videos. And so because I still wanted to do my YouTube stuff, I still wanted to think about and look at subjects that I was interested in, but the workload became untenable in my mind with just how the dynamic worked. So with that as an example, here's the question. how has your content changed by choice, and how has your content changed by necessity? I'll let that sink in for a second. So Matt, I know we didn't give you as much time as Formy's going to get, but I'll start with you. What do you think about that?
How much by choice and how much by necessity? I mean, I would say it's 90% choice in terms of like how much, I have changed about my content, like this literally like where do I want things to go. But I think in that sense, they're sort of almost intrinsically linked, because if you're not feeling like what you're doing is sort of fulfilling your interests or where you want the channel to go, you're not going to be able to sustain it. So you sort of by necessity have to switch it up, at least proportionate to how much you want it to be switched at any given point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because for your channel, the first video that, for me at least, seemed to take a new direction in the content was your video on John Edwards and the preacher guy whose name suddenly escapes me. Because that was the first... Ted Haggard. Yeah, that was the first, as far as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first one that didn't involve a dead body somewhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and it doesn't have interrogation footage in it, which is another thing. Right. Which is now, if you look at, like, I never made a hard rule of, like, I'm not doing interrogations anymore. The video before the most recent one, Dennis Olin, was another interrogation one. So if I find a good case that has an interrogation, it's actually still a huge plus. It's not like I'm consciously going, I'm not doing that anymore. Quite the opposite, actually. Again, like, to repeat myself, if something falls on my lap that has that component, it's actually a big plus. But one of the things I wanted to branch out to is just like, well, just interesting stories. If you've got enough prerequisite footage there, so it could be a network interview, it could be like a privately recorded, like, video cam, like, something the person's actually recorded or whatever, just something, just news reports, just like something to string the story together along with the kind of the VO stuff, then go for it. And Ted Haggard and John Edwards was actually relatively early in the channel. I'm just trying to place it, so because
I think
after I talked to you,
you at the time that I talked to you, you had just released Holt's Claw.
Yeah, I think I'd released Justin Ross Harris as well. So I think, because I remember talking to you about, like, I'm going to try to do a humorous one next, and that was Basil Barutsky. So I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure it was like Basil Barutsky followed by Larry Nasser after that, and then after that was Edwards and Haggard. So that's within the first 6 months of my YouTube career, is like a pretty significant paradigm shift. And actually at the time was actually one of the more popular videos on the channel. So it just goes to show, like, sometimes that change can sort of pay off. It didn't make the channel blow up, but the video itself, like, did quite well at the time.
All right. So Foreman, what do you think about that question?
Assuming that I have any choice in this world, I would say I think for me, probably a majority of everything that has happened in the trajectory of my decision making with my content was opposite to Matt, based on my decision not to use interrogation footage anymore, for the fact that I wasn't interested in being in the shadow of JCS for my entire time on YouTube. Not saying that that's what the case is with Matt. I think Matt's in a league of his own. Unfortunately, I was not in a league of my own. The one comment that stood out to me was like, "Oh, you're like the leftist version of Jim Can't Swim," and I was like, "Whatever, you know." But I don't want to be the leftist version of Jim Can't Swim. I just want to be in human form, whatever that is. And then another thing that happened was a year ago, when we talked, actually the night before we talked, Scrub, I watched Hypernormalization by Adam Curtis, and it pretty much changed a huge aspect of not just my content choices, but a lot of things in my life in terms of how I think about things. And then I started from there to go down this different trail of studying. And then eventually I was fortunate enough to have this interview that I booked with Noam Chomsky and started reading a lot of Noam's books. And from that point, really started leaning into like my I guess what's rooted in anarchist beliefs personally, and I guess pro-social mindset of like, what am I really interested in this world? And that's realistically criticizing power. So I went from interrogations, which are the antithesis of a criticism of power, in my opinion, unless they're directed towards the police or the authority figure. They're looking down on victims of a corrupt system, and I didn't want to be glorifying that. So I started making videos about other things, I guess, to keep it short.
So it was kind of a necessity of philosophy that caused you to have to change your content
and that's not to be like, oh, I'm more virtuous than the next person. It's just like what I do is I my videos are pretty much about what I read about on my own time, what I would be studying were I not making a YouTube video. Just and I find interest in these things, and I make videos about them now instead.
Okay. Can I ask you one thing, in terms of the hard decision you said to not do interrogations anymore? Like hypothetically, like if a interrogation came along that you personally were actually really interested in, would you still not make a video about it just on the principle of not making a video about an interrogation for not making a video about an interrogation's sake?
No. I think a large reason of the not using interrogation footage as well is partially for algorithmic reasons, because I don't want to solely be attracting JCS viewers, because in the long run for my channel, I don't think that's good, because for one, I think probably a large base of JCS's viewers are probably either liberal or conservative, which they're not gonna, and that's fine. I'm like, if they want to watch my channel, that's great, but I think they're largely gonna hate me. Not that that matters, but I'm trying to branch out from just that true crime subgenre into whatever else, whatever it is. I don't even know what my channel is anymore. That's a huge problem in itself.
Yeah, part of another one of the.
I was saying it can kind of be a good thing though, like giving yourself freedom to sort of just keep experimenting and playing around. Like you don't want to necessarily prematurely lock in an identity for like what your channel does if you don't think you've found that.
Right.
So
yeah, part of the motivation otherwise for having you guys on is I've been having a little bit of a content identity crisis, maybe in the last year or so. Like I said before, I experimented a little bit with some differently scripted stuff, specifically the my first attempts at true crime. And like what Matt was saying is one of the considerations I had after doing the first one. Fortunately for the first one I did on Ralph Shorty, there was footage of him before the crime, body camera footage during the crime, and then the interrogation footage after the crime. So there was actually a 3-act play basically laid out there that I could just sort of drape narration around. But then after that, it was very, very convenient in that sense. And then, of course, after that, the question is, can I find at least enough supplementary media to create a narrative that I don't have interrogation footage per se, or other things? And that was always a problem, or something that I kept thinking about as I did my trilogy so far. I don't know if there'll be a fourth one, but I got a better appreciation for what you guys do, because those were my first narrative scripted videos that weren't just reaction videos or things like that, using stock footage and trying to tell a visual story. But Yeah, it's for me. It's been because when what really started this was a couple of weeks ago. For me, sent me a couple of thumbnail ideas he had for a video he had upcoming, and as I'm looking at them, I'm thinking to myself, just how far away from where I encountered him first he's come. And of course, the two of you kind of are enjoined in my brain because I came across you both around the same time, and you're both doing similar things at that time. And I thought how much Matt had evolved from where he was at, because when I first talked to you, Matt, you were talking about intentionally wanting to move away from just being a Jim Can't Swim Jim personator, and making like, and I have a plan that Christmas of 2021 I'm gonna have that John Benet Ramsey video, and you did that too, which is just great.
I did it. Yeah, hey.
I know. I was always looking forward to that one, because I remember you talked about just how much you're interested in that case, and I was like, I can't wait for that John Benet video. Now the one, not to get too specific on you, but I couldn't, being a fanboy, I couldn't help but ask, are you still planning on doing a Jerry Sandusky video?
Tentatively, yeah. One big problem with Sandusky is it's a huge case, and you've actually got very limited raw video resources. So that's not to say it's impossible. Funnily enough, even though you intuitively wouldn't think this, that was actually largely the case with Jean Benet Ramsey of all cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've only got like a really short segment of the press conference available online, which is fucking crazy to think about, because it is literally like the biggest case probably of the last century in the US. You would think in the 21st century, someone would have VCR'd like the full press conference and it would be on YouTube, but it's not. So it's just like short-ish snippets, like the Dr. Phil interview, a few kind of old documentaries you can splice into whatever, but there's actually not a whole lot of raw vid. Unless it's an already pre-made documentary, which is like, then it just becomes a B-roll of different documentaries. You didn't want to do that. So yeah, you can do it when you have limited video, but there's even more limited video with Sandusky. There's not many extended interviews with him. There's just the train wreck one he did on Bill Costas. And there's one he did with the New York Times. I think that's about it. But John Ziegler, the big innocence advocate for Sandusky, did a big fucking podcast recently. Like it's like 20 hours long or something when you add it all up. And he's got some like secretly recorded phone conversations that are quite dramatic. So there's some stuff you could bleed in there, but a lot of it would be other like expository stuff. So it's definitely a case I'd love to explore and do like a real fucking bear with us here, guys. Like, I know this is crazy, but think about it sort of video. It could be a lot of fun. But yeah, I would need to, before committing to it, I'd need to sit down with all that raw information and really make a hard decision of like, can the general idea of what I'm wanting to do be achieved with just my resources, or would this need to be a full like Netflix or Hulu funded or what have you, like production company funded thing with original interviews and stuff and maybe even be a role to pull off. Yeah, I need to look into that. Plus, the other thing that unfortunately you do need to weigh up with these things is like, how much of a hit are you willing to take in the medium term at this point? Because Sandusky's obviously a big child molestation case, and child molestation and stuff like that tends to get, as a rule of thumb, sort of suppressed by the algorithm. It's very unpleasant matter, so it's not going to put it, as a rule of thumb, you can never know, but I get the impression that sort of stuff is not going to wind up on many people's homepage recommendations, unless you really water it down enough to make it favorable to the algorithm, which defeats the whole purpose of doing it. So it's
that's a task in itself.
Well, yeah, exactly. So I mean, like, before committing to that, I also need to make the decision, like, am I willing at this point to put 2 months into something that might get like, a quarter of the views that a more run-of-the-mill video would get? The calculus. But hey, at any given point, any given year, I might be in the mood to go, yep, fuck it, like, that's fine. But
yeah. So, similar to that, is there a subject for me that you want to cover, but you worry about the algorithm or the reaction or something that might make it less desirable to go for all the effort?
There's a lot of them, actually. And before I mention what it is, but I want to say another reason why I did go away kind of from the interrogation footage and true crime is because there's limitations, a lot of limitations with that. You know, there's only so much interrogation footage and only so many cases, and only so many cases that go beyond this person killed that person. So it's like it's telling the same story every time, but which is not fun. But after a certain period in time, it's and also I'm around a lot of people that work in law, so I hear about it anyway, and I study law, and it's kind of a lot of that. And another thing is I can't remember the other thing, but anyway, the topics that I want to touch on that I can't touch on are certain things that have to do with central intelligence, because it comes across as borderline conspiracy theory-esque, which the algorithm obviously wouldn't really be too happy about. Not exactly conspiracy theories, but
some conspiracy videos get a lot of views.
Yeah, it's just I'm afraid, because it's a really fine line before you breach that community contract or whatever it is, the community guidelines. And a lot of the other stuff, like some of the there's this one that I might actually just do, even though a lot of people won't be interested in it, is has to do with I believe it's based off of an essay written by Noam Chomsky called "The Crucifixion of El Salvador," I believe, and it has to do with I believe the Contras and how terribly brutal they essentially murdered a bunch of Nicaraguans and all of that. So.
Let's see. Sabrina Smith says, "In human form, your bit on propaganda was brilliant."
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, on the intelligence community stuff, I just did a 3-part look at a Zoom call that all these former active intelligence people had, talking about introducing diversity, equity, and inclusion into intelligence over the last 70 years or something.
Oh, yeah.
And in the middle of it, James Clapper comes in out of nowhere, like a wild James Clapper appears, who is the former director of national intelligence. And this is a complete aside, but I was kind of shocked because they were talking about how they wanted to put DEI into things. And he's like, yeah, well, back in 2003, I attended a conference on the subject, and I was preparing my speech, and I was going to tell everybody that the solution to this problem is to start recruiting people specifically from those demographics you want to fill in the numbers for. But then they told me I couldn't say that because that's talking about quotas. And I'm like, yeah, that would be a quota, wouldn't it? And then he said, so what I decided to do was do it unofficially. So he instituted discriminatory. He instituted discriminatory recruiting practices in intelligence under the radar back in the 2000s or something. And then he said, and it didn't do anything. It didn't fix it. I'm like, okay, well, good job there violating civil rights laws. Anyway, yeah, I was kind of scared too because it started talking about like CIA guys. I'm like, is this going to get me in trouble? Isn't that silly that we have to worry about that kind of stuff? Not just CIA, but just like, I mean, I get that there are standards and practices for everything, but everybody having to walk on eggshells, and just what we've seen in the last 2 weeks or so. And I know this isn't a conspiracy theory. As soon as Elon Musk buys Twitter, all of a sudden, people who were getting 200-300 new followers a day suddenly get tens of thousands because they took off the blinders and the filters and everything. And so all this under the algorithm suppression of people's ability to be found by other people. It's
I've heard the theory. I've heard, speaking of conspiracy theories, but I've heard the theory because like Elon Musk doesn't officially, as in like papers changing hands. I don't think he's officially on paper.
Not yet. No.
So I heard that some people were saying, well, it wouldn't be him actually instructing changes to the algorithm. It might be them sort of like burning evidence for what they've been doing. So that when he does get in the driver's seat, he can't go, hey guys, you were right about the shadow bans. Like the code won't be there anymore.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's a lot of
yeah.
pre-ass covering
ridiculous.
before there's an audit. Basically, is what the theory's going like. But
Hey, can I quickly share with you just one thing? Sorry,
Sure.
total tangent. I just wanted to get it out there because I've never shared this with anyone before, but not to toot my own horn, I thought it was quite a good skit idea. Do you
Mhm.
remember that PSA they had for the CIA? It would have been it must have been about almost exactly a year ago, like this time last year. They released this thing, and I can't remember what the demographic was, but it was a total woke for the CIA type ad. So I think it was like a lesbian woman of color or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was like a lesbian woman with color going, "I'm a lesbian woman with color, and I fit in at the CIA. They brought me in and did all this and blah, blah, blah." And it shows her next to the flagpole and reading a book in the library and stuff. And I just thought it would be so great if before just toward the end of wrapping that PSA up, they showed her beating someone over the face with a phone book and just ends with "I'm a spook," and if I can, anyone can,
Yeah.
It's just a weird thing to be doing that sort of messaging for.
Yeah, I don't work at a black site. I work at a site of color. The propaganda. I mean, I do this all the time on my channel, obviously, but I could go chapter and verse on just the utter ridiculousness and backwards nature of the thinking on those subjects. And that's also the part of the reason why I decided to take the plunge and try to do something different last year, is because I felt like, okay, am I a one-trick pony on this whole thing? What is my channel for? What am I doing? Am I learning anything? Am I being driven by my own interests anymore? Am I just being driven by habit? I ask myself those things all the time because I still, like I say, I still want to, keep this in my mind as a glorified hobby. I don't want this to be work, but I also want it to be something that I'm not just doing because I'm bored. I want to keep interested. And sometimes, and especially with, just as an example, the crime videos, it took me so long to just keep focused because the research and lining it. So what I did was I found every article I could find on the subject, and then I listed them all in chronological order, and then I read through each one of them to find how many bits of information the other ones didn't have, and then list all that stuff, and then slowly over time
That's a lot of work.
script. Yeah, and once I got the script, then I was like, okay, now I need to figure out what piece of stock footage am I going to put in for this paragraph, or I'm only going to record audio for 3 paragraphs a day, because if I start trying to do the whole thing at once, I'm going to drive myself nuts. And it was this. And every day I was like, why am I doing this? What is my motivation? Yeah. This thing is not going to get monetized. I'm not even going to attempt to monetize it. There's no point. It's a complete lark, and it's like nothing I've done before. Do I love this?
You can get limited ads on a lot of that kind of stuff, by the way. So don't leave money on the ground. You might have. I mean, what didn't Shorty get a couple 100,000 views or something?
The one has got 21,000 views or something. And I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't that concerned. Like I said, I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it to test my limits. It's like so many people say, it's like, oh, it's one thing to criticize until you actually try to do it. And I'm like, well, that's true. So I tried to do it, and I learned a lot about, at least for myself, the quality checks and the construction and the research and everything. And so when I look at you guys, when I look at Jim Can't Swim or any of these other, and just as an aside, the Jim Can't Swim subgenre, man, when I found you guys, you're the best of the best, because everybody at that time in the early days was just, I'm going to take one giant block of interrogation footage and bookend it with a Wikipedia read, and then put it out on YouTube, and that's it. And I was just, oh God, I mean, don't get me wrong, I can find interest in watching just raw interrogation footage. Blue Dot interrogation, Red Circle, where they just put that stuff out. The Crime Circus, great channels if you're just looking for raw interrogation.
Blue Dot's a really, really cool guy. I don't know him personally, but we've commented back and forth a few times, and he's super nice. And actually, that reminds me, that was the other thing I was trying to mention earlier, is that another reason why it changed is because after Jim Can't Swim came out with that one video about the one kid that blew up to like 64 million views or whatever now. His not most recent
Nicholas Cruz.
Yeah, that one. When he came out with that, there was this second wave of Jim impersonators, and at that point, I had switched. I think I had done my video on the Boomer generation, and I had already switched over, but it blew up. And after that, there was 10 to 15 new Jim Can't Swim guys, and at that point, I was like, oh. Well, that's it for me, because other people are taking it over now, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But, I guess I'm risking sounding like egomaniacal or I don't want to sound like I'm trying to one up anybody, but I'm just trying to be original, in a sense.
Yeah,
I get it.
Okay. Yeah, the community of Jim Can't Swim people, the wheat has definitely been separated from the chaff over the last several months, as far as I've seen. There's just as a smattering of recommendations if you're looking for that kind of stuff. There's a relatively new channel called Dreading that came out. The guy does a really great job looking at interrogation stuff and things. There's a channel called Explore With Us that is basically like, it's one of those crime channels that sometimes has those top 5 kind of things, but they've done some really good up there Jim Can't Swim stuff in the last couple of months with the
They've
Screen
been around
Killers.
for a while, haven't they?
They have been, but they're just now starting to their most recent one of their most recent documentaries. They actually went out and did original interviews with people involved in the case, which I think was a first for them. And it was really good stuff. And so, yeah, there are some gems out there, but man, in those early months or so, there was you guys, and then there was the Wikipedia artists, and it was just some terrible stuff sometimes. All Fuzzed Out says your own interest should always be your own interest should always be the drive behind what you're making. Never make something because you think it's expected of you as a creator. Well, that's the other thing too, is your motivation for your own satisfaction, or is this your job? I don't expect
to All Fuzzed Out. He's I don't know his real name, but he's a really cool guy.
Cool. I don't have the motivation. Channel. I don't have the motivation of this is my job. Yeah, go ahead.
I've spoken to All Fuzzed Out in DMs too. Seems like a nice guy. So I haven't. Yep, same for me. I was also going to say, speaking of shout outs, Beside the Dying Fire is another one that I've seen that. I've spoken to him in DMs too, but I've seen some of his work, and I think he's narratively definitely a big cut above a lot of the rest. I mean, I don't watch a lot of this stuff in my free time, obviously, because I use
right.
So I mean, I wish I could shout out more people. I don't mean to be thrifty on that, but I did have occasion to watch a bit of Beside the Dying Fire because he was actually covering something I wanted to see a take on. And I've spoken to him behind the scenes, and I've come to think that I kind of regard him as one of the top tier guys in the sort of subgenre.
So for me, since you're kind of in a world of your own at this point, all things considered. I mean, generally speaking, the three of us all cover completely different things at this stage of the game. What are you? I guess. What are you aiming to do? Are you aiming to educate? Are you aiming to expand your own understanding of things? Are you trying to convince somebody to come over to your side of thinking? What do you think your goal is at this point?
I'm definitely not trying to convince anybody because honestly, I don't think I'm capable of that, but also that would be strange. So I'm not trying to be a propagandist. Although that is my nickname on your show, right? What was it?
Oh, the Lord of Propaganda. Yeah, that came up the other day. Somebody was saying, "Who was the Lord of Propaganda?" I was like, "Who did we give that name to?" Oh, yeah, no,
yeah, but I'm not trying to do that.
Well, I was going to say, propaganda isn't actually an inherently negative term, right?
No, not necessarily.
Right, originally it wasn't, but it is now. From a descriptive perspective, yeah. But I guess, like I say, everything I write about on my channel, including the Jim Can't Swim stuff, that's what I was interested at the time, and this is what I'm interested in now. So my goal is just to share and synthesize whatever ideas I'm into at the moment because I think they're cool. That's there's no other way I can explain it. It's kind of like a lot of people talk about, creativity, like with musicianship, and how, it's not necessarily something you're thinking of, and it just kind of like it comes through you somewhere, through your fingers or wherever. And I kind of see it like that because, I can't necessarily control what I'm exposed to. I have a lot of people around me and they're into something. And if it strikes me as interesting, I might be interested in it. That might change my interests. And also, it also depends on, algorithms nowadays. Like, what am I exposed to on the internet that might, pique my interest? So who knows where it's going to go, but my intentions are realistically just to make decent videos, like entertaining videos.
Yeah, my content generally comes from just a roll of the dice. Like, okay, what has TEDx posted this week, or what's this news article, or whatever. It wasn't until I had to like pick a subject and work it that. And I before this, I rewatched my interviews with both of you to make sure I wasn't going to end up asking the exact same questions as previous. And in my interview with you, Matt, we talked about that sort of aha moment of how to come at a story or how to cover a subject from an angle that's interesting to you. Like the subject matter might be kind of goofy, but then you find that one little seed that gives you the idea of what to do. And that happened to me in my second crime video, where the interrogation footage was terrible. The crime itself was, not to be too morbid about it, but relatively boilerplate, honor killing of a man, or a man killing his wife. But as I'm reading the stories and I'm debating about what to do, there's this one little tidbit about how the family members did not give the prosecution any photos of the victim while she was alive. They refrained from giving any photos of her, and that occurred to me is that seemed really cruel. That seemed like you were trying to erase her even more than had already been done by the murder. And so that gave me the idea of the second death, where it's you die, but then you're also forgotten as the second part of it, and that kind of gave me a frame for it. Has there been a particular instance in both of you, for either of you, in any of your research or projects where you were unsure of what to do, but then you had that aha eureka moment in your head that gave you the direction you needed? For me, have you had that happen at all?
A couple times, I think. One time, I'm trying to remember which video was it. It was one of the videos where I was really interested in doing the topic a handful of times, and I like started trying to write about it. I can't remember which video it was right now, and then I think either I came across the right footage or the right information, and it just it's like a dam breaking. Once it breaks, it just kind of flows, but you got to get that initial spark. And that is becoming actually harder and harder to find for me. Like, I've wanted to do a really long video, like an hour, and for my channel, like an hour, maybe an hour and a half, if I could write about it. But I haven't been inspired enough by any ideas to want to write about something for 10,000 words. And I'm waiting for that moment, like that you're explaining. But it has happened a handful of times.
Matt, has there been a dam breaking moment of aha for you that's significant thus far?
Generally speaking, it's not a matter of like one big eureka moment for how to put the whole video together. It's more of a like little small eureka moments, sort of as you're piecing it together. Like, oh, there's a good transition. Oh, there's a way I could introduce something. Oh, there's something that I should table to make sure it. If you get what I mean, like small little things that piece it all together. I'm thinking about that. I actually, as you were asking the question, because I knew I was going to struggle with that one, I just brought up my channel to look over them and think. And funny enough, there's two back to back where I had one, the least significant one, the Denise Williams video, the idea of like starting it off, telling it as if she's the victim, and then doing a big 180 like within like the first 3 minutes, as opposed to an end twist, like a start twist. That was like an idea that came like almost somewhat miraculously and went, that's gonna make it a good sell. But the other more significant one in terms of like the whole video, the Predators. I struggled with that one.
Yeah.
Almost as much as I've struggled with any other video. I think maybe the Memory Wars and Johnny and Amber are ones I've struggled with like an equivalent amount of like, how the fuck do I put this together?
Yeah.
But the big eureka moment for me was like discovering Rami El Daily, the guy who because I knew I wanted it to be like a turning it on the predator catchers type thing, but you've got that whole conflict of like, I don't want to be saying they're worse than the actual child molesters. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But it's just like something is going on here, which is like, it's hard to articulate quite how, but it's creepy and there's something wrong about this. But again, because of that conflict of not wanting to say the other thing, like struggling to, but then I found Rami and I went like, he makes the point for me.
Living
like,
example,
he takes a lot of the articulating burden off of my shoulders. So that was a big like kind of like the heavens open after like, a week and a half of like just fucking really struggling with it. All kind of coming together.
Yeah, your Denise Williams deal, it reminded me completely unrelated, but I assume, I could be wrong, that either of you have seen the movie American Psycho.
Oh yeah, of course.
So there's a scene where he's being interviewed by Willem Dafoe's cop character, and behind the scenes for each back and forth, Willem Dafoe told the director, "Well, hey, how about this? For each segment, I'll give you 3 takes. I'll give you a take where I think he's guilty. I'll give you a take where I think he's innocent. And I'll give you a take where I don't know anything. And it's the exact same dialogue, but delivered differently. And you can just mix and match as you want." So when you're watching that, you see his mood change from cut to cut, back and forth. And it's also meant to keep not only the audience off base, but also the character as well, as he's sort of like trying to read what the cop's doing and trying to tell a story.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah, trying to tell a story
So
like in sort of a I don't know what you want to call it, symmetric way. Is that what I was saying?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, trying to fake people out a little bit and approach, and that kind of what you did, Matt, with the Holtzclaw documentary. Which, by the way, guys, I talked about in the first interview, and I can't recommend it enough. If you know nothing about the Daniel Holtzclaw, right? Was it Daniel Holtzclaw? I think it's Daniel Holtzclaw.
Case.
Anyway, is that his first name? Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
Daniel
yeah. If you don't, if you don't know anything about the case, definitely watch it. If you do know something about the case, definitely watch it. I won't give it away, but Matt takes a very, very effective and excellent tact on how to cover something like that. And and you had some. Well, you've had some YouTube struggles with that sucker and several others since then, right?
So age restrictions can be a thing. The problem with Holtzclaw does go into like really graphic detail, and it also I put a montage of police violence up the front, which I totally legitimately thought was like, and there's still an argument that it's not gratuitous, at the time, but now I've come to think I didn't really need that. So, but given that kind of stuff is in there, I totally think that is a really valid use of the age restriction. But there was a period where it was just like shadow banned, but you couldn't search it.
Right.
The only way you could find it was like someone directly sending in the URL, but they hadn't told me about any action. It had just been sort of done. So that was the big struggle I had with it. Once they put it back up to make it visible, and it was just age restricted, I had no problem with that. But I have had problems with the Chauvin and Floyd one. While
that one I was surprised that you even. I was surprised that sucker wasn't just like shot down immediately.
Well, Hamika, I guess you're more cynical than me, but
yeah, I am. It's true.
I get it shows like it has footage of a man dying, so I get that. But at the same time, like it's the biggest news story in the world for that year, I think you could say. And there's so much. Well, we're talking about propaganda around it from both sides. I would say on that in terms of like misleading propaganda, just to show like I don't even think it's my bias in this particular case. I think it's just the truth. more the right, like people saying 3 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. Don't you know that you're allowed to go out and spout that and say that without context. That'll go on everyone's front page because that doesn't show any violence. But if you go, hey, without actually trying to put my hand on the scales or whatever, look, here is what happened from point A to point Z. Here's what both sides have argued at any particular point. So, giving everyone a fair shake, hearing everything out, but showing that this is the actual case and this is the actual arguments. That gets suppressed. That doesn't go on any home pages because it shows the brutal, it shows the upsetting thing. And I just think that's I get YouTube are dealing with volume and everything like that. So I appreciate their problem as well. But I just think it creates such a warped ecosystem when the incentives are structured like that. So I've had problems with that. And I had problems with Johnny and Amber getting age restricted. And I went through the robots trying to go, why? What was it that's not anywhere else that was and they never said they got it wrong, but then they just quietly took it away. So I guess I'll just take that as a so yeah. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there, but I feel quite strongly about the actions. Sticks in my craw a bit.
Real quick, BB Dasha says, I'm late trying to get caught up, but I just wanted to say I adore all of you. Matt, I really adore you. He, not at all creepy. I'm just kidding. I
gotta say about, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was going to say about the Holtzclaw video. That video, even though it has no relation to my Black Swan theory video, was really inspirational for my Black Swan theory video. Because
what is the Black Swan theory? For those of us that are not as smart as you, because we're not, what is the Black Swan theory?
Well, I'm not very smart, but Black Swan theory is just this half-baked theory that sounds kind of cool, but made by this guy who I actually completely disagree with personally now. It's this idea that there was nobody believed that there was there were any black swans, and now they found a black swan, and it became a theory that the least expected thing could actually happen in a sense, and that our statistical analyses instruments actually actively blind us to the outlier events that are unexpected, like certain events throughout history. For instance, like the Fukushima explosion in the nuclear.
The Titanic sinking. Yeah, the unsinkable ship.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't thought about it in a while, obviously. But anyway, that video is, I was actively trying to make it asymmetrical in a sense, because it's 3 storylines, and I lead each one up to a culminating area or a climax, and then I start off the next one, and then lead that one up to a climax and start off the next, and eventually one after the other finish all of the sub narratives, and all of the sub narratives also revolve around the main narrative, which is the collapse of the Soviet Union. But that video, the Holtzclaw video, had a kind of an inspiration based off of, like, when I watched it, the footage, the use of footage, and also it was a pretty lengthy video. Obviously, I think yours was like 2 hours long. Was it?
2 hours and 15 minutes.
It was feature length. Yeah, feature length film.
Yeah, mine was only a half an hour, but for me that was like kind of long. But there was a few things that I drew inspiration from that one for sure. And even though it has no relation whatsoever in terms of subject matter, so I think, I don't know, I've drawn a lot of influence from a lot of the things that Matt does, for sure.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're kind of giving me an idea too now, like, or I don't know if it's an idea for a video, if there's enough to hold a video up, but like, if there's something I think about a lot, and maybe like there should be, maybe I should try and find a case that illustrates this point. It's not quite the Black Swan theory, but it's definitely of a type with it. Just the idea of like coincidences, and like when we think of, people tend to think when they see like a low odds proposition or a low odds event, they often seem to take it as an argument that it couldn't have happened. Like one one thing I hear, it's like one of the most annoying things to hear like a true crime watcher say is some people have this thing of like, I don't believe in coincidences. And you've got to go like, well, you're a fucking idiot, because like they happen.
They happen all the time.
Right now, as we're talking, a really low odds event is happening somewhere. So when you see something that could be explained by coincidence in a case, like no doubt, if you're seeing a lot of that, that's absolutely good reason to start thinking this person might have been up to no good.
Right.
But you do actually, especially if it's an isolated coincidence, you actually do have to entertain the idea of like, hey, dude, maybe they did really just get unlucky. It can happen. You can't close the door on that possibility in any given case.
There's always the what's the apocryphal urban legend where you have you ever see the movie Magnolia with Tom Cruise?
I know it's polarizing. I really like it.
I love it. I love it. I think it's great. I think
it's my wife's favorite movie.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, amazing flick, and it's all built around. For those of you that don't know, part of the theme of that movie is built around the idea of coincidence, of just life having these odd little connections that by themselves don't mean anything, but once you look at them in a tapestry, they all start to fit together. Another movie that's or documentary, I should say, that's like that, probably far more obscure. Have you guys heard of Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control?
I have heard the name. I don't know what it is though.
So this is an Errol Morris documentary from the 90s, and I don't want to give it away, but he interviews a topiary artist, a mole rat expert, and a roboticist. And when he starts talking to these three people, at first you're like, why are we talking to these three people? And then over the course of the movie, going back and forth between what they have to say about their professions and everything else, by the end, it's this braided, amazing sort of synergy of thoughts and perspectives and ideas that all come together, which you wouldn't have expected. And to this day, I do not know how he came up with the idea for this, or how he could possibly have imagined constructing such a braided narrative like that. But that's something that I recommend anybody else who's interested in documentaries. Just weird sort of stream of consciousness kind of deal. It's an interesting way to look at the world.
That sounds really similar to Hypernormalization, which I mentioned earlier, that I had watched right the night before I was interviewed by you for the first time, and that is just like it's a mess like that, but ended up being, if someone were to ask me what my favorite movie ever is, it would be probably that one now, but it's similar in that way.
So just as a tangent from that, for me, are you thinking about going more into, or at least doing more often, interviews? Because man, you grabbed a whale with Noam Chomsky there, and then you had another one recently, right?
Yeah, with Marv Waterstone, who is a colleague of Noam, of Professor Chomsky's. If I can, I mean, it's really hard to get in touch with people that are like. Professor Chomsky is really nice. He responds to me all the time, and I bother him all the time, back and forth about random stuff. But not everybody's like that. For instance, like I try to contact Glenn Greenwald after he shared that episode.
That's right.
On my podcast, and he is unreachable. So
sure,
if I can get a hold of them, I would love to. Because I see like the stuff that I do like in my documentaries as journalism, in a sense. Although it may be historical, some of it's historic. The historic stuff is usually there to present a parallel of something that's currently happening.
Did you have any luck with the anti-war dude? I suggested to you. I'm just blanking.
I haven't asked yet because I've been trying to get a hold of a handful of people.
Right.
Most of them have fallen through. I was about to. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bo of the Fifth Column. He's a YouTuber. I almost was able to book him for an interview, but unfortunately, I think that fell through.
And that brings my mind to the side project you guys both do. Matt, you've got a podcast you do on a regular basis, separate from all the other crime stuff.
Thank you so much for reminding me, because I would have forgotten to plug this. Yeah, we're trying to build a little bit of an audience now. We've got doing decent. We've got what we call it the Twib Nation, the population of dozens. So we're definitely got that little kind of starting point that we're really proud of. But definitely like small beans right now, early days. But yeah, it's called The Week in Brief that I host with Tom Harper, who's a guy I went to broadcasting school with. And basically the pretense of the show is that we catch you up to speed with like all the news that you need to know about from the last 7 days. If you didn't hear about it on Twib, it wasn't important. But in reality, it's just kind of a load of bollocks. Is sort of the basic, as I say, premise of the show, pretense and actual premise of the show. So just The Week in Brief, and you can find that on iTunes and Spotify and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Real quick, thank you, Point Curation. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you, Point. Appreciate it. By the way, guys, I didn't say it explicitly. I should have. If you have any questions or anything for Matt or for me, just throw them into the chat, and I will pull them up as I see them. I think there might have been a couple that I missed, so if I did, I apologize. Please just repost them, and I'll get to them. Before me, you also have a semi-regular podcast you do, don't you?
Yeah, similar to Matt's, except we don't do weekly because my co-host Ashok is like a really, really busy academic, and we don't get to see each other very often. So whenever we do have an opportunity, we will just hang out and talk about philosophy. He's a philosophy major. He's working his way to become a professor really soon, and we talk about psychology and philosophy, and it kind of started out like I've been doing it for like three and a half years now, which is interesting. But it started off as we were both really into Gregorian chants, and I was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a radio show that just played Gregorian chants? And it started off like that, but it's totally something different now. Obviously, it's called Our Thoughts Tonight. You can find it anywhere on podcasts.
Gregorian DJs. That'd be
Yeah.
That'd be something. Gosh, what else did I want to ask? Well, how much longer do you think you'll be doing this? You know, I mean, I see it as a hobby, so it's not a necessity financially for me. I like to think I'm not doing it purely because it's the only source of fuel for my ego or something. But I mean, I came up on my 5th year this last October, and I'm well into my 6th now doing this stuff. Do you see yourselves continuing to do this for a long period of time, or do you think there'll be a clear endpoint? Like, is there something that will tell you, do you think, when it's time to stop? Maybe that's the question I should ask for me.
I don't know if a better medium comes around, maybe I will slow down if I'm healthy, or let me start with this. As long as I'm healthy, and I'm able to, be creative, I'll probably be doing this for the time being. Unless a better medium comes around, then I might change. Or if I lose my YouTube channel or something like that, then I'll probably have to stop. But I think to talk about Professor Chomsky again, I mean, the guy's 90. He's about to turn 94 in December, this coming December, and he's been doing, whatever he's doing. He's written over 100 books, and he's been doing interviews with amateurs like myself for the last, almost 70 or 60 plus years. So yeah. I'm kind of that mindset, because I don't necessarily think what I'm doing is nearly as important as what he's doing. But I think there is, in just the topics I choose, I think that, even if again, I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but you could probably learn something just based off of somebody else's perspective. So maybe I probably will keep doing it as long as I'm healthy. And it's fun. That's another thing.
Right. Matt?
I think last time we spoke, we did kind of talk about how life kind of comes at you in mysterious ways. So like, kind of, so there's not like a hard answer to that, but like, look, just going with like what I know now, I would say like I'm still getting like fulfillment out of it.
Mhm.
I like to say I'm enjoying it, but it's one of those funny things. Is like I would say yes, I really like my job, but I don't actually like any like one isolated aspect of my job. Like the writing is stressful, the putting the voiceover
Yes.
together is hell on earth. The editing can be kind of fun, but sometimes not fun. But like in terms of like seeing the finished product, like it's definitely worth it, and I enjoy like creating things, right?
Mhm.
I
Yes.
agree completely.
So yeah, so I mean, like, basically, I'm gonna keep doing this until either a better opportunity, as in like better for me slash more fulfilling opportunity presents itself, or I think of an idea of like, holy shit, I need to go out and make this happen. Like, pitch production companies or whatever to, and then transition to that sort of thing. Like, so yeah, basically indefinite, I guess, is my response.
Yeah, and I know I'm just fanboying here, but honestly, at this stage of the game, I'm surprised that either um, a production company hasn't snapped you up or something, or given you a project to do or something. Because I mean, like I say, your stuff, man, it's like something I would imagine I would find on Hulu or Netflix or something. Holtzclaw, the John Edwards one, the Jean Benet one. I mean, it's so. I mean, I might be biased because I talked to you about it beforehand, but it's so obvious that that is a subject and a case that you have a lot of passion and interest for, and it really shows throughout that entire deal. And I think that's I've watched a couple of documentaries on John Benet Ramsey, the case, and I might be biased. I think yours is probably up there as one of the best, just as far as its completeness and its overall neutrality in approaching each of the angles on the subject. Um, but yeah.
Thanks. I mean, thank you. And I mean, that was sort of my goal, and is like to make. I think we were talking about it at the time. Is like not to make the best documentary necessarily, but to make the most thorough, self-contained piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, yeah, there's more. You there's things that will give you more detail if you want to go and read like a bunch of books about it. And there's documentaries, but they're either slanted for a particular theory, or they've got that annoying like Discovery Channel, just kind of sensational sort
Yeah.
of angle to them. So I wanted to do something that was like involving but sober, and also like didn't put its finger on the scales and went like, look, here's the three camps of thought, and here's why people believe in those various um, camps. Like, you decide what sticks out to you as the most compelling. And so that was kind of my goal of what to make. And I think it came out how I wanted. So I'm glad to hear that you received it that way.
Point Curation asks, what does Matt Orchard, Inhuman Form, think of existentialism? I have a fixation on it recently.
I used to identify pretty regularly as an existentialist. Until recently, I decided, or no, I didn't identify as it, but I identified with existentialism. Like I've actually read quite a bit of Jean-Paul Sartre, and other existentialists. Also, largely spoken about it quite a bit because of my co-host of the podcast. He, philosopher and all that. But existentialism is a really realistic part of human behavior from my perspective, up to a certain extent, where it turns into nihilism, and then it becomes unhealthy, in my opinion. But I think we all have moments of existential dread, and it's a natural part of being conscious, I think.
Matt?
I actually had to look up existentialism as Henry was talking. I'm not.
I had to remind myself
I'm
of the
not
definition.
I'm not a big philosophy guy. You know what's a real big coincidence though? Is I was literally reading.
I don't believe in coincidences.
I was literally reading the Wikipedia article on determinism, like right before starting this conversation, just because it happened to be tangentially sort of related to a video I'm working on, and like what two people were kind of discussing in like that video. So I mean, like I've only read like the blurb that defines it, so maybe I'm not getting like the full. But it seemed to be kind of like a free will theory that we have like agency over like what we do and like our destinies. Would that be a decent
Kind
kind
of.
of one?
I think that's an aspect of existentialism where it's really like essentialism, for instance. Essentialism says that we all have not necessarily a determined purpose, but a purpose that we are on this earth for. For instance, like a chair's essence is to be a chair, and humans also have essence like that, which is a thought of Aristotle. But which also has a lot of merit. I'm not taking away from that. I'm kind of when it comes to philosophies, I kind of I come in agreement with a lot of them. But existentialism is kind of the antithesis of that, where Jean-Paul Sartre would say we're doomed to our free will, and we have complete choices over all of our decisions, and that in itself is terrifying.
I mean, I kind of subscribe to the. I don't know if I'll go as far as saying I don't believe in free will. I haven't like thought about it deeply enough, looked into it deeply enough, cared deeply enough to come to like a really hard conclusion on like individual, like in the moment, like personal free will. But I am very much of the not like Sam Harris invented this, but like the only guy I listen to that talks about this sort of stuff is Sam Harris. I'm very much of the Sam Harris school of thought that even if you were to have personal free will, which he doesn't believe, the circumstances of your birth and all the stuff that happens around you is going to have such an effect on the sorts of decisions you make and direction your life goes that your personal moment-to-moment free will doesn't really do anything to negate that. It's sort of it's almost a bit of a wash. So I guess I don't believe that we really have that much control over our destiny. Largely, it's up to our circumstances.
Yeah,
I think
that doesn't answer the question.
Sorry, I don't know. You were going to say something, Scribe?
Oh, well, I mean, with the times that I've thought about subject matter like that, I just generally think that, not to be too cynical about everything, but that ultimately, and I don't know if there's a philosophical term for this. I'm sure there is because everybody thinks about anything, but I'm not a philosopher. We're all driven by necessity. We're all driven by like I get up in the morning because I wake up. I brush my teeth because it's nasty in my mouth. I go to work because I need money to live. Everything I help somebody out because I feel guilty or I want to feel better about myself. Everything we do in some way, shape, or form is driven by a kind of selfishness, not necessarily mean-spirited, not necessarily malicious, but a kind of selfishness. The only act I can come up with that is completely absent of selfishness. Well, maybe not even then. It depends on the circumstances. Would be like jumping on a grenade or something. In that and that's a total. Yeah, that'd be a total release. But at the same time, it's like, well, if this thing is going to end up hurting someone you love, you're doing it out of a kind of benevolent selfishness kind of thing. So that's
very Randian.
Maybe that's it. I mean, but I don't. Like I said, I haven't thought about these things so deeply that I could say that that's how I see the world. That's how I see people as a bunch of selfish idiots just walking around doing what they want. That's not how I look at it. But when I think deeply,
they were selfish idiots. Yeah. She thought it was good. She's like, it's good to be driven by your own self-interest. Like, was the opposite is like self-hatred or what have you. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty about wanting to further your own, happiness.
Yeah,
but that has its own consequences. But
yeah. But I also think that beyond that, the ingredient that, I mean, maybe, and this might be my cynicism talking. The ingredient to that, even that kind of thinking that I don't think is out there enough, is a regular self-interrogation of motive and consequence of choices and things, and trying to learn. I mean, to basically learn from your mistakes, gain wisdom rather than knowledge, if that makes any sense. And that pursuit, and maybe I'm just poisoned by being on Twitter too often, but that pursuit doesn't seem to be very common these days. But maybe I'm just, like I say, a jaded jerkwad.
What is the pursuit of wisdom versus knowledge, you said?
Yeah, like, knowledge is just knowing, and this is my definition. Knowledge is knowing something, but wisdom is having the experience and the consideration to be able to apply what you've learned to a future event for some productive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah. The one thing that I was thinking about of what you mentioned, where you have these drives to, do what you do in the morning and so on and so on. I would say is probably like close to determinism, or consequentialism or something of that nature. But the whole thing with Sam Harris, where he's a bit of and when it comes to free will, people, in my opinion, are too much of absolutists, because they think it's a yes or no question. Whereas I don't think that there is yes, there is free will, or no, there is no free will. I think it's, for one, we know, at least, and this has been proven times over by Aristotle, and from Aristotle on for over 1,000 years, nobody was able to elaborate on it until Immanuel Kant with the transcendental method, that we do not know up to a certain point. We can understand what human behavior is. What are the consequences of human behavior, how people act, based off of statistical calculations of a number of times. But at a certain point where you get deep enough, when you look deep enough into a person's thoughts, we don't know where those thoughts come from. So we know that consciousness is a thing. It's just we don't understand what consciousness is, and we cannot account for how we make those decisions. How I made this decision to start a YouTube channel, I don't know. How you made the decision to ask us to to interview us today, like we can't exactly pinpoint where that thought came from. So that in itself kind of proves that there is free will, in a sense.
No, it does.
But also,
it doesn't.
The environment is also affecting that free will. So it's kind of a mix of the both.
But it doesn't. It just shows that we can't pinpoint exactly where it comes from. That doesn't mean, ergo, it comes from free will. It might be a predetermined thing that we just haven't been able to identify yet.
Well, I know why I decided
to a certain extent. But yeah, we can't go ahead and assume that it is free will either. So because we are noticing that we're able to also decide whether we want to voice these thoughts or not.
Yeah, I know exactly why I had you two on today, because I'm lonely. BB Dash reminded me of something that I should have shouted out as well. I think Dave's Lemonade is worth a mention too, for anyone interested. His insight is mind-blowing for anyone interested. Yeah, just one more shout out. Dave's Lemonade, I have tried so hard to get him to come on to do an interview, but he's so nervous about being interviewed, and I've kind of backed off from asking him about it now. And he doesn't even have a Twitter account. So if you guys don't know about Dave's Lemonade, go check out his channel, tell him I sent you. And maybe someday I'll be able to convince him to do an interview. But he does a lot of long form trial coverage. He also does a whole series on the To Catch a Predator videos with a lot better analysis than some of the other ones out there. This conversation is going to.
One thing I say, just to add on that shout out, like I said, I don't watch any of like the stuff in the genre in my own time, so I can't personally attest to Dave's Lemonade. I will say though, as someone in the genre who obviously gets lots of comments, I think like there's no other creator aside from JCS, which doesn't count. There's no other creator I've heard more shout outs for than Dave's Lemonade. So
yeah,
seriously,
that is high praise.
Yeah, his analysis and his obviously I don't know him personally, but just the gentle nature in which he presents terrible subject matter, but with respect and patience. It's very, I mean, this is going to sound weird, but it is a very soothing experience to have Dave's Lemonade to detail to you the effects, the consequences, and the circumstances of a murder, which doesn't make any sense, but that's just is the way he does it, and the way he presents it was sort of like, I don't know, gentleness and care, I suppose, is one way to put it. Not to butter his biscuit too much with him absent here, but maybe that'll convince him to come talk to me sometime. I ran out of like planned things to ask you guys about maybe half an hour ago, and I figure we'll just maybe go another 15 minutes or so unless there's other things we want to talk about. But
I want to argue free will. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, I was about to say. I was like, well, I didn't want you guys to come to blows or anything over like
Well,
who's right
I
now.
wasn't even trying to argue. I wasn't even trying to argue. I was just saying, well, but I mean, like, if you're saying, yeah, I mean, like, if you just to tie that up, if you're saying, well, you can't say it doesn't exist, I'm happy to settle on that. I don't know if it does or doesn't, but
no, I'm not saying it exists or doesn't exist. Like, I agree that we don't know, but we also know that we have the ability to make decisions.
Right. Okay. Cool.
I didn't want to shut it down. It's just that I'm starting to like. I don't know what to say now because I've said my bit. And I'm like, okay, I'll be over here. I don't know how to participate in philosophical conversations.
It's been debated for thousands of years.
I know. Well, there's some subjects like as a related aside, I get very nervous about approaching subjects where I'm completely clueless, like economics, political theory, philosophy, because I know only enough to be dangerous about some of those things. And so when I come across a video or something that's talking about any of those subjects, I stop and go like, okay, either I do this and I give a big Surgeon General's warning at the beginning to everybody that I'm an idiot on this. So if I say something wrong, don't blame me. Or I try to bring somebody on who knows it better than I do. So like I've had Formy on before about political theory. I've had Ranting Monkey on before about economic stuff. And how much, here's a question. I am a one-man shop. Are you two still one-man shops?
Are you talking about in terms of creating
video production, etc.? I mean, I obviously occasionally do like crossovers or get somebody to read some VO for you or otherwise, but all things considered, because oftentimes I'll hear channels say something to the effect of, or a host or announcer say, we've looked into this and we've done that. And I always think, do they have a team? They have people behind them? Wow, that'd be really cool if I had somebody helping me. But I was just curious if you guys are still one-man shows for your stuff. For me?
Yeah, I am, except for that video I had on Nietzsche was written by Ashok, which is the co-host of Our Thoughts Tonight.
Oh, shit.
And that was just because he had the idea of like, he was like, hey, could I try to write a video for you? I was like, sure, yeah. And, Nietzsche's pretty cool, so why not?
Yeah, I am a one-man shop with, there's rare exceptions, like, and there's small exceptions. Well, not to diminish their contributions in terms of helping me, but like in terms of like actual man hours spent putting the video together, like it's not that kind of hands-on help. So like there's stuff like I've corresponded with a woman named Rebecca. I'm blanking on her last name, but she works with like people who have like come to recant repressed memories and stuff, and so she's helped me with like questions and pointers and stuff, like and fact checking, like going over the scripts and then going, well, that's not quite right, maybe reword that sort of help I've occasionally gotten. Like with John and Johnny and Amber, I had a person who was hardcore into the case, even though they were hardcore on Johnny's side, like it didn't make it get skewed. I was just like, look, let me, if I've got something I think makes them look bad or whatever, let me sort of just hash that out with you to see if I'm missing something, or so that was really helpful in terms of like getting sort of pointers and going, okay, that's, I feel solid in making that assertion, or I need to rejig that a little bit, or there's this piece of information that's important. So that kind of help I've gotten here and there. But aside from that, it's just me. And I was going to say, I do use the royal we, which is maybe a bit where it gets confusing. But the reason I do that is not to be pretentious and make it seem like it's a bigger operation than it is. It's just that if you're doing that kind of detached analysis sort of like format of video, rather than like a it's me speaking to the camera type thing, I think it takes people out of it and just sort of ruins the presentation. If all of a sudden you inject, hey, I think that this kind of looks, but I think we discombobulate people. So I'm not actually claiming it's not just me. I just think in the moment I don't want to phrase it that way because it will, as I say, it's kind of discombobulate people. I
hadn't thought about it in those terms. You got a point. Yeah, I was, and I didn't mean it as a pejorative or anything. I was just always. I
understand it would confuse people. Like, why is he saying we? Yeah.
Yeah, I just always assume that there's like some big operation behind, but that's the other thing too. And somebody I missed it. Someone in the chat said it, but YouTube content creators are producing stuff that is on par or better with what is being put out, quote unquote, professionally these days. And to the audience, here's something, and we've done a little bit here, but to the audience, something that I want to encourage all of you to do is what we've done here tonight. And if there is a content creator out there that you like, let people know about them. I've said this on Lords of the Night when Lords of the Night was a thing forever. You are our best algorithm, especially these days, especially with YouTube and everything else. Doesn't matter. And when you do this, if there's a way to do it, depending on which platform you're on, let the creator know that you've done so. Because trust me, they are grateful for it. I try to thank every time that somebody tweets out an announcement for a video or just mention it. I do my best when I'm aware of it to thank you personally, because you don't need to do that, and the fact that you do, I really appreciate it. So just as with Matt, for me, Dave's Lemonade, Dreading, By the Fire. Did I get that right? By the Fire.
Beside the Dying Fire.
Beside the Dying Fire. Anybody. Just be sure to let people know that you like them. Be sure to leave a comment, because I tell you, I'll take any comment. But I mean, man, the encouraging comments stick with me more than the bad ones do. And even the ones that are critical, I'm happy to engage if it's reasonable criticism and not like you're dumb. But yeah, you guys are really part of the reason that. Go.
I legitimately think the first 100 subscribers are more exciting than the first 100,000. Like, it is like, and I'm not saying that to be fucking Hallmark cards. It's actually true. Because it's so hard to get any visibility on YouTube starting from scratch. Like, if someone hasn't tried it, it's hard to understand.
Yes.
It's so easy to just go straight to the elephant's graveyard. When you make something and you actually see like the counter is starting to go up, and some comments are starting to go through, it's like such a fucking exciting, magical feeling. So boosting those like small creators who are doing something good, I agree, is that's really, really important if you find one.
Yeah, when I started out, I said to myself, if I get 10 subscribers, I'll be amazed. I'll be amazed. and then once I got to 100, I was like, okay, if I get to 500 subscribers, I'm going to use my new fame to promote other channels. Now that I started doing little videos called Criminally Undersubbed for a short while of some other channels and friends of mine that I thought needed some more attention. And then people I didn't know started saying, "Hey, can you do one for me?" And I'm like, how about no? And I felt bad saying no, so I just stopped doing them altogether rather than make people feel bad or feel like a jerk.
If you put yourself out there as the booster or whatever, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, I feel bad about that. If someone hits me up like trying to get promotion, or if I've got time, sometimes I try and give them some advice or tips or whatever, but I don't like retweet or whatever by request, because then like I'm gonna become.
That's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
But I mean, you promoted me like really early on in the game. Like, I think I don't know if you remember, but I think it was something like, I think it might have been less than 1,000 subs, or maybe less than 3,000.
In the interview I did with you, you said something to the effect of almost 2,000. So you were just like somewhere in the neighborhood of like upwards of high just under 2,000 or something. So that was
and
that was right.
Moment that you were at 70,000, I think, within like maybe 3 months. When I started my YouTube channel, I think, Matt, you had 30,000, I think. So you were right about where I was at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, just to show. The early kind of like encouragement or whatever, it can mean so much to. And I mean, I was actually really fucking stoked on like the 2,000 that I had at the time. So it wasn't so much, but yeah, you get what I mean. Like it really does. It does mean the world to people to kind of like get that, early boost and sort of encouragement.
Yeah. I guess I'll start moving towards wrapping up because I don't want to keep you guys too long. my most interesting experience in the last year regarding subscribers was it took me almost exactly 5 years to get 5,000 subscribers. Like it was just within a month or two of my 5th anniversary that I went over the 5,000 mark. And that's right about the time that I released my first true crime video. And in 2 weeks, I got 1,500 new subscribers from that one video. And I was just like, what have I been doing with my life the last 4 years? But the thing for me, I don't, this isn't a comment on like, I don't care about my subscribers. Subscriber count is not a concern of mine. That's never been the concern. Like I say, I've always tried to make this look like, or at least for me, be a hobby, if nothing else. I don't want to take it too seriously. No, go ahead.
Well, I think like also on that note, it's really important to remember that subscriber count isn't the be-all, end-all metric, and there are a bunch of other metrics. There are a bunch of other metrics that are also not the be-all, end-all metric. Like how many views does something get, for instance? Like the Memory Wars, I think, is my least viewed video on my channel, possibly, if I'm not missing something. It's also the one that like patrons and stuff, like people have actually decided to support me by forking out, 5 clams a month. It's like in probably the top 3-5 that sort of person is likely to mention as like a real standout, as like one of their absolute favorites. So what's more important, like getting the view count up as high as possible, or like making the viewers you do have really enthusiastic and go like, I'm coming back for this guy no matter what? Because that's another metric. Like, what is your lowest like basement level amount you can get in a month? That's really important. Like if, like let's say, 50,000 or whatever is a bad month for you. Okay, but is it like the worst you can possibly do? Because if 50,000 is the worst you can possibly do, for instance, that's something to really, really be proud of. Don't just look at like, oh, the video that like I got 3 million for, I won't do that every time. Like, take stock in what your worst case is as well. Did I just ramble
really
a bit
interesting.
there?
No,
I mean,
totally. It makes sense.
Yeah, these considerations are different for every creator. Like some people, the focus has to be, because if it's their primary source of income, their concerns and their attentions are going to be completely different from somebody like me, who's just sort of like being a occasional cowboy kind of thing at it. And so, yeah, my concern isn't about. I mean, I like when new people subscribe. I like when people tell me. I like my stuff. I like seeing familiar faces, quote unquote, in the chat for my broadcasts, but I don't pay that much attention to the metrics because A, I don't have to for what my goal is, and B, I don't need to altogether. But that's not to say that I'm judging anybody else who does, because everybody does this for different reasons and with different goals in mind. And so, yeah, 500 subscribers, 500,000 subscribers. I'd be happy if I had 50 hardcore fans that are just loving my stuff and I get to interact with. And if everybody else was just kind of watching occasionally, that'd be fine too. I don't know.
Yeah. I would be lying if I said I didn't care, to be honest with you. But it's not to say that I don't appreciate where I am. But I had the strange experience of like my channel exploding really fucking fast. Up to 20,000. I went from under 1,000 to 20,000 in 1 week, which was absurd. And then it completely has slowed since. So for about, a year, I was like, well, what the hell did I do right? And how can I recreate that? So that was tough because my posts started doing, or my views started dwindling, and also like my subscriber growth slowed. So I was naturally, you have the human instinct to want to hoard, not necessarily hoard, but, accumulate, I guess. And then after it got pretty frustrating at a certain point where I was like, you know what, it's because I kind of destroyed my place in the algorithm by, changing from JCS, and you could see that as, how you gain suddenly 1,500 in 2 weeks or whatever, like
something like that. It was a very short amount of time.
Yeah, that kind of growth is great, but like I said, in the beginning of this, like I couldn't, and I talked to Matt about this repeatedly, like I couldn't keep doing true crime because I just wasn't into it. And I don't want to,
Yeah.
I'd rather want to do what I want to do and gain those subscribers rather than act like JCS, which some people are totally okay with, and it wasn't for me because I wanted to talk about boomers apparently.
And you'd rather it's not sustainable to like just completely go, oh well, this is popular, so I will just keep doing exactly this. Like you're not going to be able to keep that up for years and years, so it's not really even a choice. I guess the one thing like 20,000 in a week. I don't think I've even gotten that. I think maybe my fastest month, like in the wake of Coldest Case, was probably something like 35,000 over the course of a month. I think you just need to like take stock in the fact that that is an outlier. So it's not going to happen. Yeah, like not only is that not going to happen every time, it's probably not going to happen every couple of years or whatever. It's a very sort of, So you just need.
That was kind of it was kind of like that's what I thought for a few months there. That was like what the YouTube experience was. But realistically, because of you and JCS, I found the right market and there was demand. Yeah. So I hit, it was right time at the right place kind of moment.
Yeah. Real quick. Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, it's fine. I was going to say more of the same. It's fine.
Dylan Farm says, I started watching when Kurt had you the first time. Yeah. Speaking of like coincidence and weird things of life, just a professional comedian and comedic writer sees a mention of me on another channel and then contacts me directly to have me on his show just out of the blue, a stand-up comic. And my sister, who's done stand-up comedy, she's like, I know who Kurt Metzger is. Like, what? It's just one of those weird things. And I just jumped out at me. Okay. I have honestly run out of things to say. I think we're probably at a wrap-up time. I don't know. But I want to just totally hand it over real quick to both of you. If there's anything we touched on that we didn't talk enough about, if there's anything you want to shout out or mention, upcoming or otherwise, and, I'll probably need a bathroom break at some point either way. But yeah, for me, anything on your mind?
I just want to thank you, Scribe, for having us on and for, promoting us and, just creating a community, in a sense for a handful of creators and also your personal community. And thanks, Matt, for, for all the help that you provide my channel over the last year and a half or so, even though our genres practically have no resemblance to each other anymore.
No, but I still mean about, your current content. What I said to you the first time I reached out wasn't like, oh, there's another person making JCS askew videos. This is great. I should encourage them. If anything, it would be the opposite. Like, not in terms of like, I don't want competition, but I'd found most of the other stuff that I'd seen at that point sort of like, it wasn't really bringing the new to the table, but your stuff was actually, not only was the commentary actually original and clearly informed, clearly well read as opposed to just making shit up or reading a Wikipedia article, but the actual visuals were well done, the actual video editing was well done. So I just wanted to encourage you based off of that, really. And when you switched to a different topic, like I've said to you in the past, like, there are some, because it is so varied, there are some like ones you'll choose where I'm not maybe that into it, but there are other ones you choose where I would think I wouldn't be into it, like the financial crisis or the nuclear war one and the Black Swan one were both like ones that I really dug and really enjoyed. It's still the same thing. I still think they're really well made. There absolutely is an audience for. It's just that you're obviously in a different niche now, and so it's just a matter of keep plugging away, and it'll come with time. But yeah, I think you're as good of more so. I think you're. I was going to say I think you're as good of a video creator as when I first reached out to you, but obviously I would go further than that and say you're much better. Even more so what I initially said to you. So yeah, keep on going, man. You're doing good.
Audience, if you have any last questions, put them in there right now. But now I'm going to take a couple minutes here to give you guys, okay, what's your next project in human form, or what are you thinking about doing next?
Right now, I'm writing a video on how it's a commentary on Elon Musk's quest for free speech, and
very timely.
the agreement and disagreement involving that.
Okay, and Matt, if you feel comfortable in giving it away, or maybe just this generalized subject matter, what are you working on next?
Yeah, I never have a problem with teasing what I'm doing next, unless there was some reason for a big reveal. It's actually the biggest, hardest, writer's block I think I might have ever had. But I'm trying to grow right now. So the next video, really broadly speaking, I'm hoping to make about cults. If I keep struggling this much, if I keep struggling this much for more than another day or so, I might have to just table it and just find an interrogation and hit out something a bit quicker and then return to it. But I'm going to keep plugging away, and I'm still I have faith that I can crack through this. So I've been looking at a lot of stuff on Nexium, and I'm currently looking at a video interview that the Gil Ellis and Mac did with the leader of Nexium, Keith Raniere, because I think there might be a good way of kind of profile one aspect, one common aspect of cults, and use that as a bit of a jumping block to other things. But in addition to that, I've been having a brief email correspondence. Sorry?
There's some good footage with that guy. I've seen it. It's almost really similar to an interrogation. That interview. There's a lot of interview footage with the Nexium guy.
Well, I need to keep looking because I haven't seen much critical interviews with him. But maybe if you've got any links, send them to me. And
well, I don't think that they're not necessarily putting him in a corner, but just the bizarre ingratiation involved in those interviews where I don't even remember what they're talking about, but it's just got a strange air to it.
And it's very not to go. I won't give too much away on that, but that's a bit of kind of what the intro I'm working on is sort of exploring. But from there, jumping off to I don't know where. It's just a matter of trying to find, okay, what does this have in common with a lot of others, and what are the questions and answers I want to provide about cults, and what can I use to do that? But the one other thing I have been doing, and I don't know for what purpose yet, or whether it even end up being used once all is said and done, but I've actually started having a brief email correspondence with the two surviving members of Heaven's Gate, because there's two people. There's two people who didn't have the poison, who weren't at the compound that day, and they just maintained the website as it was on the day, and they'll fucking answer your emails if you email them. So I'm not making fun of them or whatever, but that's just been kind of fascinating of so why this and why that, and what do you think about it? It's just been a very unlike anything any exchange I've had before.
I've looked at cults for years and years and years, and read books on them and everything else, and the main mechanisms to start your cult is, as the individual or small cabal of individuals, is you have to possess something and you have to be able to provide something. And what you possess is the answer, and what you can provide is belonging. And if you can get those two things down to a science, you will find followers one way, shape, or form. And like I say, it's a thing like a guy goes into a bar with the intent of getting laid. If he asks 11 women just flat out, you want to go somewhere with me, he only has to get it once. He only has to win once to make it work. And with cult followers, you find that right person, and they'll find the next person, and
Yeah, I get that, and I've heard that kind of thing before, and I believe that. I guess the question I always have, though, and I've kind of found I'm not sure I have an answer to this, and I'm not sure if I've seen anyone give a good answer to this, is okay, so you've got the belonging and all of that, but how does someone come to here, for instance, there's a spaceship that's going to come down to Earth, and we're all going to get on board and go to the next level. How do they hear that and go, yeah, okay, I guess that's the answer, and this is what I want to belong to? Because the answer doesn't seem to be gullibility. They don't seem particularly gullible, the people I've seen those Heaven's Gate interviews, exit interviews before they kill themselves. It doesn't be stupidity. Some of them, and if you look at I think one of the guys at Waco, what was it, Branch Davidians. I think like one of their people was like a Harvard graduate or whatever. So it's not, it's not lack of education.
Well, here's my counterpoint to that. What do you think that every Catholic that goes up and takes communion thinks they're actually eating the body of Christ?
Yeah, fair point. And I mean, I'm normally the person who's quick to make such a point because I'm a religion critic. But at least there you've got like thousands of years of it being like engraved into society. So you're sort of like from a baby, you're kind of taught not to question that. So it's a little bit different from like coming along to an adult and just going spaceship.
Well, I mean, you have people that believe in UFOs, you have people that believe in ghosts, and if they've already had that that notion, or they can be brought over into thinking it, or there's also the age-old mechanism of wanting to fit in and not wanting to argue with the people that you get along with and go along to get along. And each individual member of a cult's going to have a different. If you had the opportunity to ask them the whys and the wherefores, there's plenty of interviews with the survivors of Jonestown who talk about the fact that at a certain point their family members became so ingrained in the church that a lot of the reason they did what they did was because if they didn't, they feared for the safety of their family members. So the motivations can start out completely benign, and then over time it can be extortion, it can be fear of being alone, it can be someone's got some info on you. It really comes down to what they do. And so it doesn't necessarily mean they actually believe in the UFOs or they believe this. They might have been brainwashed. They might have been backed into a corner. It really does depend on the individual.
Let me bring up a point here. You said the guy with that went to Harvard, for instance. Well, what does it take to what does it take to finish, let's say, a PhD in any subject?
6 years. 6 years of dedication to the subject. That's about it.
Like 6 years of paying attention to directions. So I would argue that somebody who has a PhD from Harvard or something is better at following orders. And I think I'm very familiar with college environments. A lot of people make this argument that college environments are supposedly, the most liberal and free thinking. Far from the truth, far from the truth. They're very, they have their own doctrine. But also, this is also kind of another argument for free will in the sense that a lot of arguments in the media or a lot of arguments that are presented by cults, for example, are presented as though they are the reasonable thing to do. And because human instinct, this is, again, one argument for the possibility of free will, is like we as human beings have, an active consciousness that has the ability to discern right from wrong to a pretty good extent. And that's why these things have and this also goes for advertising media and, cult-like persuasion has to present their argument as the reasonable decision. Otherwise, people wouldn't actually believe in these things. And then at a certain point, they do get roped in, and then it's too late.
Just the one thing you said about the education thing actually making you more susceptible to that sort of thing. It reminded me of this great one-liner that Michael Mellis has. It's easier to train a smart dog than a dumb dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The Branch Davidians. I mean, my question would be when I've forgotten now, but if you told me today, just out of the blue, like one of the Branch Davidians was a Yale graduate, I say a PhD in what? If it's a PhD in theology or something, then maybe he's already a sold customer. Because and that's something that I always. Especially with these TEDx things, somebody comes up on a stage and says, or their title is Dr. XYZ. I'm like, okay, doctor of what? Because you can be a doctor of anything these days. Doesn't necessarily mean you're credible for whatever you're talking about. But as far as cults go, I've been looking at and curious and morbidly curious about cults for years and years and years. So I'm looking forward to that one. whenever you get around to it. And I hope you find an angle.
Maybe I'll get in touch with you too then, just to like chat about, because like sometimes like breaking the writer's block is more a matter of like just banging ideas around and with someone until
for sure
to go, oh,
Sure.
you know. So yeah, we'll see if maybe we'll be back here in much sooner than you initially thought. Yeah.
Well, hey guys, we're getting to that time of night, I think, or morning, or wherever you are, and I just want to say, first off, if anybody in the audience couldn't already tell, I'm big fans. Multiple personality. No, I'm a big fan of both of these guys. I think you might be too if you take a look at their stuff. Their links are in the description below. YouTube channels, Twitter. I think I got PayPal and Patreon, the whole 9 yards down there for you to take a look at. Guys, if I hadn't said before, I'll say it again. I am so glad that I came across you when I did. I'm so glad that I've had the opportunity to connect with you as quasi-colleagues and friends over the last year or two. And I'm very grateful that you took the time out today to talk to me about my random thoughts about your evolution as artists and everything else.
Well,
likewise,
Scribe.
Thank you
for saying that. Yeah.
Well, everybody, hey, thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. And I tend to forget these all the time. At the top of the chat box, as Keyword AM has provided us the links to the GoFundMe's for our friends Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and His Kitten. They and their friends and family could use your help if you have a couple extra bucks. But with that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. Matt, for me, thank you so much again for taking the time out. Everybody, I hope you've had a great Sunday, a great weekend. I hope the week ahead is good for you as well. And guys, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.